There's a movie that came out a while back with Jake Gyllenhaal called Source Code. Now in Source Code, Jake Gyllenhaal is reliving the same 6 minutes over and over and over again. The objective that he has is to find a bomb on a train headed for Chicago. And if he doesn't achieve his objective, the bomb blows up, he dies, and resets and keeps living the same 6 minutes over and over again. I highly recommend this film. I thought it was pretty good. It's a more recent film. However, this concept is nothing new. There's a movie with Tom Cruise called The Edge of Tomorrow where, again, the character is reliving the same things over and over. There's a kind of a horror movie called Happy Death Day where the character is living the same day over and over. And these characters, as they live through these experiences, are learning. There's cognition involved because the first time through and the last time through in the movie, things are completely different. So, for example, Jake Gyllenhaal, knows that a lady's going to trip and fall. She does it every single time, so he always grabs her and protects her from falling. Or he knows that someone's going to spill some water on him, so he stops that person. Oh, hey, watch out! And so the water doesn't get spilled on his pants. But as he goes through, he realizes that he's wasting time, and he starts to prioritize and manage how he uses his 6 minutes. That lady can fall because she's going to be okay, or someone else will catch her, or I don't really need to worry about the water because I'm not even going to be there because I need to be over here on this part of the train, so the water isn't even going to fall on me and affect me, because every time through is a new cognitive experience, which works into basically what's called player response theory in game theory, where it basically states that a player cannot approach the same game, the same situation, the same way twice. They always have some sort of upper level cognition. They've learned something. So why am I talking about these things? Because this idea, this narrative mechanism of resetting this Groundhog's Day, which is another one kind of idea, is what's featured in the game that I'm talking about today. It's one of my favorite games. It's called Time Stories. So Time Stories was introduced to me as Quantum Leap meets Choose Your Own Adventure. That's how it was kind of defined to me when I first heard about it. It came out in 2015. It was nominated for the Spiel des Jahres, which is the German Game of the Year. It's basically like getting nominated for an Oscar. So it's got a lot of praise. It's one of my favorite games. Unfortunately, it didn't win that year, but it still is a game that I really, really enjoy. Now, before we go any further, I am not going to talk about how the game is played. There's different pieces that move around in decks, and it uses cards and has this board, and you're using time and things like that. I'm not going to go into all the mechanisms. You roll some dice for some combat and things like that. But I will say that the game is cooperative in nature, and you're basically getting a story that you're working through with your friends. And so it's the same thing as the movies. Time Stories is basically, thematically and narratively speaking, you are a time agent. You are basically sent in these little pods that you probably can't see too well, back in time where you inhabit what they call, I forget what they're called, a person, and so you jump into that person's body and you're now playing them, much akin to Quantum Leap. And so the game really has lots of different ways that it can give you different scenarios. Now the base box is what I kind of have set up here, comes with its own scenario. It's kind of a horror theme, but that's not really what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about first of all, and then I'll kind of talk about all the extra stuff that I have here, is the idea that I mentioned earlier of player response theory and how this game simulates those movies, that narrative mechanism of a character repeating the same thing because they don't approach the same situation twice because there's cognition involved. They've learned something. They've learned that they have to manage their time. And in this game, it really replicates that idea very, very well, because you realize where you can go, where you can't go. When you run out of time, the game does have a time tracker to it, which is essentially your resource. You have to manage your time. So the first time through, yeah, you want to check everything out. Let's go talk to this lady. Let's go over into this corner and check out this picture, or maybe there's something in this newspaper we can read. And you'll find what you need and what you don't, because when you run out of time, everything resets. And you start the game as if you just jump in back to the first scene of the movie. But you've learned, and you're like, we need to go here first, forget about this person, forget about the newspaper. We already know what it says, because we've learned. And so we're building layers upon layers. Even though it's the same narrative, in our brains we are processing and formulating. Now, another thing that I like about it is that players get to look at cards. These cards are double-sided. This is a panoramic type thing, and these cards are double-sided, which players can go to and look at the cards secretively, and then they basically tell to their friends. So it's also got a storytelling aspect to it of, hey, I went to the old lady in the corner. Her name is Abigail. She's the head nurse here, and she thinks that we're all crazy, or something like that. And so I get to take control of the narrative and explain to my friends, this is what I saw, and this is what the person said, or whatever. Should we believe her? In one of them, there's a guy who's tied to a bed, saying, I'm not crazy. They think I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy. Do you untie him? Do you not? You know, as the game resets and you come back to that person who is tied up again because everything has been reset, you realize we don't have time for this. Or no, we do have to make time for this, because this is something that we absolutely need to do. And so there's this level of group think and cognition of building upon layers in your brain of resourcing or managing your resource, which is time, which is why it's called Time Stories. It's one of my favorite games. So now that I've said that, kind of why I like the mechanism. So again, I like the mechanism because it's got this resetting, learning sort of thing that mimics some of the movies I've been talking about. I like the narrative aspect to it, where the players get to control the narrative. They get to make choices. They get to look at cards. They get to tell their friends, this is what I saw, you know, because only that person gets to see that card. And so there are certain parts in the game, certain elements where it is kind of important that you describe what you see. Like there's a painting or a picture or a drawing, excuse me, with some weird things on it that's like, maybe someone should write this down, because later we're going to need to know. But only I can see it, so I can describe it to you and things like that. So it's the top layer narrative. From a narratology experience, there's the top layer narrative, which is basically the game. The designers, they have the top layer, they're telling the story, but then within this framed narrative, I guess if you want to call it, we are also telling a story between each other, between us as a group, and we're all thinking together and we're learning together as we play through every iteration of the game, because we're changing our habits, we're changing what we're doing. We're not going to go here, we're going to go here, because we have to maximize our resource, which is time. So that's really why I like the game. So I'll talk a little bit more about what you can expect when you get into Time Stories, if this is a video that really sparks your interest. Because again, the rules are quite basic, but there are plenty of videos out there that'll talk more about the actual gameplay and the mechanisms, rolling dice, there's combat that's involved, there's hit points, and there's different people that you can inhabit, so to speak, and jump from person to person depending on whatever. But the great thing about this game is that once you buy the base game, you can get all of the expansion scenarios, basically. So the base game, which I'll put here, is like I said, an asylum. So it's a horror theme to it, and it's probably one of the best. It has a moment at the very end. I completed it at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It was just myself and one other individual, and it was just one of those gaming moments that I'll remember forever, as far as what they did and how they surprised me and where they hid things within the game, and going back and looking and being like, oh, that was there, or like this card was stuck to another card or something, or this had a barcode on it that you could scan, and just things like that. So the base game is super fun, but you get the one scenario that's a 1920s French asylum, where you take on the role of inmates, crazy people in an asylum in the 1920s. So then they came out with the Marcy case. This takes place in 1992, Wisconsin, during a how should I say, let's just, for lack of better terms, call it a zombie outbreak, although it might be like a virus outbreak, but essentially it's a dystopian kind of theme in Wisconsin, where you're looking for this gal named Marcy who's gone missing, and so you've been sent back to find her so that you can change time, because you're changing the future of all these different timelines. They're different timelines, by the way, which I'll get into actually in the next one. So the next one that they came out with, and I think I've got these in order, at least in the order that I bought them, is A Prophecy of Dragons. And now this is, the timeline is 7553 AT. So it's a different timeline. And A Prophecy of Dragons is basically a fantasy theme, D&D. There's gnomes in this, there's wizards, there's enchanted castles that you go into. I don't know if it's a castle or not, but it's basically a fantasy theme for this one. This one was probably not my favorite because it does have a different timeline. It doesn't feel like it's grounded in reality at all. And plus this one is one of the longer ones. So they came out with this one, A Prophecy of Dragons. And I should pause and say, these all give you the components that you put into the game. So they're basically like modules that you'll put into the game. You'll put these cards, you'll put the items out, you'll get the the bits and the pieces for them. So all you need is the base game, and then you can just start buying these little boxes and just plugging them in like a VCR. You can just plug it in and put the cards where they're supposed to be, and then just play. Put out the map and things like that. So the next one that came out is an Egyptian theme called Under the Mask, which is 1146 NT. So it's another kind of a different timeline. And so this one is basically Egyptian. You inhabit the Egyptian workers and pharaohs, and you're trying to find this mask that was buried or stolen or whatever. I'm not going to give away too much of the story, but give you the idea of the theme. It's an Egyptian theme. This one was one of my favorites, and it's called Expedition Endurance. It takes place in 1914, so right about the time of World War I, and it takes place on if I can get this right, a boat, a sea boat that gets stuck in the ice, and no one's heard from them, and so you're sent back in time to explore this boat and see why they're stuck. It takes place in the ice, so it's cold, and this one was one of my favorites. After playing some of these other ones and being moderately impressed, this one really got me back into the game. I really like this one, and the theme on this one is actually quite popular. I'm not going to spoil it, but the whole triggering, the inciting incident of why this is happening is actually quite popular right now amongst board games. But this one was really good. It has a cool mechanism where it jumps ahead and then it jumps back and then jumps ahead in time, kind of like showing you. So you'll walk into a room and you'll see someone, something horrific, like someone who has shot themselves. And then you'll jump back 6 minutes and you'll go into that room and you'll see someone who's like loading a gun and crying, and very deep things like that, where you're like, oh, they show you the reveal first and then they go back and do the setup. And it's just interesting what they do with it, with the narrative. The next one that came out, 1419, this one is called Lumen If I Die, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't remember too much about this one. It takes place during the Crusades. And you're basically going around, you know, trying to do crusading type things. I won't give away too much because there's kind of a spoiler in this one. Because if I haven't mentioned, which I haven't mentioned, is that over the base game and all of these extra ones, yes, there's individual stories inside each one. I mean, each one of these is a contained book, essentially. It's a story from beginning to end. You solve it, you figure it out. You can find a way to, you know, rescue the girl or find the mask or whatever it is you need to do. But there's also a whole overarching story amongst all of them, of these other people and this other evil kind of time-traveling faction, basically like people that work for the, how should I say, the enemy company of your company and things like that. I won't give it away, but all of these are kind of connected somehow, and they give you little bits and pieces and little flashes as you buy these and go through the whole set. So a couple more left. This one is called a Strela Drive. It takes place in 1982 in Hollywood, California, and it's got that 80s sort of theme to it. It's kind of 80s retro like music, and like there's drugs and stuff in it. This one, as it says on the box, is for mature audiences because this one is quite dark with like drugs and alcohol and just Hollywood in the 80s or whatever. This one I really enjoyed. I know people hated this one. They shot it to pieces on the internet, but this one is, without spoiling too much, has a very like Charles Manson kind of vibe to it, and murders and things like that. So that's this one. I really enjoyed this one as well, although I think I'm the only one that did, according to the internet. The next one, I should stop here and say this is as far as I've gone fully. The next one I've started and I haven't finished the entire set, but I have started the Brotherhood of the Coast. So this is basically just pirates. You're pirates. You jump into pirates. You're sailing around to different islands. You're trying to find these 4 brothers, and you either have a chance to like tell them this big secret about their family or to kill them. It's your choice. So if you kill all 4 of them, or if you decide to tell them what the secret is and let them live and stuff. I did not finish this one. I haven't. I do plan to at some point in my life, but I haven't finished this one. But I can tell you what the theme is, and the theme is pirates. Which brings us to the finale, right? Because they said this is the whole set, the whole series, the overarching story is going to end right here with the last one, which I'm not going to speak too much on because I don't know if you can tell the wrap is still on it. I have not even played it, but it is called Madame, and it takes place in 1673, and that's about all I really know about it. Other than that, it's the final in the series of this kind of overarching story between time stories and these other factions and people, and it's got a, you know, it's got a finale. Like, think of a TV show. It's like it's the last episode in the season. As far as what this particular one is about exactly, I'm not sure because I kind of go in blind and I haven't even taken the cellophane off of it yet. And so this is another one, the Brotherhood of the Coast, the pirate one, and then this finale one are the 2 ones that I'm still trying to, you know, get to the table and get finished. So there's all this stuff here that you can get for time stories. And like I said, you play with your friends, you reset. The game is kind of expensive, and you know, if you buy all the, say, what is there, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, there's probably 10 stories. You know, it's going to cost you a little bit, but it's really fun to play with your friends, and it's fun to have those aha moments, because the game does, like I said, especially with the first one, just moments where you go, oh my gosh, you go to bed and you're like, that was so cool. I never even thought of that. Or like holding a card up to a light or something to where you can see the answer on something, and it's just so cool. It's so fun, and so that's why it's featured as one of my favorite board game features. And so that's it for me. Time Stories. Everyone can check it out. And I'll see you all at the next video. Thanks for watching.